how fake fans took over fandoms. It's gonna be an interesting one, so let's dive in.
Rage bait. No one is immune to it, and at times it can be quite fun to do to others, but with most things, there will always be a roadblock, an immutable force that feels almost impossible to tune out and overcome. And for me, I get almost irrationally annoyed when talking to comic book LARPers because they are the unbeatable boss in the game. There is no way around them. Their thought process is so set in stone that they actually think they're right, and no amount of evidence you throw their way will make them change their mind. And before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I have to remind myself there are normal people here, and while it might feel real, I understand that social media is just one giant bubble, and their voices and opinions are not the norm, no matter how loud they may seem. All that to say, LARP is not a part of most people's vocabulary, and many of us really only start to hear it and start seeing it, the term used, a lot more this year. So originally it meant, and I quote, a type of interactive role-playing game in which the participants portray characters through physical action, often in costume and with props. So LARP in and of
Huh?
itself is an
So it's
acronym
like, wait, like a cosplay? Though he does say acronym.
for live action role playing. You can see how that definition eventually became the
Ah,
basis
live
for its
action
current
role
meaning
playing.
after it was co-opted. Like many things are, we can't have nice things because LARPing, in the context we're talking about today, basically means being a fake fan, role-playing as a fan, and trying to blend in, which unfortunately isn't very hard since the majority of people are casual fans just like them, hopping in and out of discussions and giving their own 2 cents if they find the topic vaguely interesting. And of course, there is nothing wrong with that. The problem is that these people give their opinions as if it was gospel, an unchangeable fact, a scripture
Okay.
in a holy book, when it is not. If they were
Basically,
willing to concede after
Delulu.
somebody takes the time to educate them, then everything would be fine. But
Straight
again,
up Delulu.
they fight back, and it probably has to do something with ego, right? People are prideful, and rather than admit that they're wrong, they would rather just rage bait you and move on with their day. And this affects all fandoms. What we'll be talking about today, of course, will be comic books. That's my main forte. But feel free to leave
Comic
some
books.
experiences or grievances you've
Haven't heard that in a long time. Seriously though, haven't read any comic books in a long time.
had in other fandoms down below. Use this as kind of like a discussion post to air out what annoys you the most with modern fandoms. I'm sure there'll be a lot of others who can relate, but Nate, all of your rants usually have some sort of
Hey,
spark.
the Spider-Man
What
game.
ticked you off this time? Well, I would probably pop a blood vessel trying to gather all the material floating around online to put it in this video, but a huge point of discussion last month came from this comic book, I say lightly, a comic book superhero podcast. You've probably seen them around on your feed, but I don't really like sending hate, so I'm not going to mention them here. What I will say is that they had a very interesting discussion that really me off. Good bleeps though, we do like to
Okay.
keep it PG around here, because they crafted one of the most counterintuitive question and answer setups I have ever seen.
Let's
They
hear it.
posed the question, do you have to read comics to be a comic book fan? Anyone with
What?
common sense would probably give you a pretty reasonable answer to that, but they said no. And their guest, they went even further, saying it might actually be better if people don't read comics at all because they won't develop preconceived, strict notions about what a character should be. I don't know how to break it to you, but you're essentially cultivating fanfiction and made up ideas at that point, which I probably shouldn't be surprised by because that's how TikTok kind of operates in the big 2026, with its completely made up character facts just floating around. But since a lot of you are already structured like this, not my viewers of course, I'm just shooting shots out there into the ether, I would like to problematically segregate you guys over to AO3, which is another big thing that seemed to come out of nowhere, at least from my perspective. It stands for Archive of Our Own, and it's basically a site where you can share your own
Archive
fan
of
works,
Our
get
Own.
notified when your favorite work, series, or
Oh, so
users
the O3 is literally just of our own. I see.
update,
That was like, what a weird acronym.
participate in challenges, keep track of works you visited and works you want to check out later. What a deal. Shout out Agent and Extra Emily, but no offense, You could not catch me here ever. I cannot imagine shifting and sifting through fanfic after fanfic, trying to find something good. I'll just create it in my own head, thank you very much, and hopefully it comes to reality one day, which, ironically enough, a
Hunts
lot of
reality
people
one day.
have done, but for me in particular, it's with the Flash, who, ironically enough again, is one of the most LARPed characters in the entire fandom. In my experience, the Flash is kind of an anomaly when it comes to the fandom space. A lot of Flash fans are very attached to Barry Allen, largely because of the TV show. For a lot of people, that was their introduction to the character, so naturally that version became the default image of who they see the Flash and who he's supposed to be. However, in the current comics, at least since 2021, Wally West has been the main Flash in basically
Yeah.
anything you can think
And
of.
let's not forget, like, the even previous version of Flash. I don't remember him, but I do remember he had, like, the metal World War I cap. Like, that's an OG Flash. Like, straight up the first one, I think. I remember him, too. It's like Wally West, this guy, the new Flash, that is. And the old Flash. Like, there's three Flashes that I know of. Technically speaking, four with Zoom? Yellow Flash, basically.
Of the main ongoing series, crossover events, cameo appearances, team books. He is everywhere. He's been everywhere. He's even the main Flash in the absolute universe. Right now, Barry doesn't even have his powers, and that has been the status quo now for about a year and a half. But funnily enough, despite all of that, the big Flash discourse recently hasn't been about the stories or the direction of the character, it's been about Wally's new suit. For reference, I'll be showing Gant's post in the background, and honestly, look at bro, look how happy he is. And he should be, because dare I say, this might be the best Flash redesign we've ever seen since a Manipul's Flash Barry suit in the New 52. But prepare to get rage baited if you're a Wally fan with the text on screen. You have been warned, because a lot of people online have been nitpicking this design, saying that it looks way too much like Barry's suit. And I really do not get this mentality. Wally doesn't look like Barry, he looks like the Flash, and that's the point. All the artists involved clearly did their thing here. It is a timeless design that actually looks like it might have some staying power. The previous suit got some flack for being too experimental for a Flash design, and now people
Fair.
are complaining that this one looks too similar to the classic look we've seen before.
I mean, what was it? To this day, my favorite thing that everyone seems to be quite having issues with is with the System Shock remake. The old one with the tank controls, and then you had the new one, which quite literally stuck so close to the original. Aside from like occasional visual changes and making sense of things, it's pretty much one to one to the game. Well, granted, there are some character changes, but still one to one to the game. The old game. It was like what 4 decades ago, if not more, and people were complaining that it's too faithful to the original. Like, that's insane. Like, people can't even appreciate being faithful to something from the past. They straight up either want, when you stray away and make it something new, they complain. And when you and when you go back to form and keep it to the original, they complain again. No satisfaction. And that's why the infamous phrase, if you try to satisfy everyone, you satisfy no one, exists. Because at the end of the day, no one will be satisfied. There is no satisfaction. Just stick to your guns and either they like it, either not. And that's it.
They keep posting that meme where it's a guy and then the same guy with a toothpick in his mouth, basically saying there's barely a difference. But yes, a toothpick can and will carry your aura. Small details matter. The Barry comparisons are especially annoying because almost every suit Wally has ever worn has been inspired by Barry. That was his mentor, his
Like, if I
idol.
remember correctly, the only suit that was kind of different was his newer child version that was kind of like Yellow Flash inspired. It had like red pants, yellow shirt, and something like that. I mean, it made him stand out more, but at the end of the day, each Flash can have their own style. That's fine, but Also, nothing wrong with sticking to a similar costume motif. I guess that's essentially the main point of like, do you want them to be diverse in outfits like, say, Batman's gallery of family gallery, where they have like Nightwing, Robin, Batgirl, maybe some other version that's there, like Batman Beyond, I guess I'll mention. But yeah, it's like they're only aside from Batman Beyond, everyone else is just their own unique suit. Batgirl sticks the closest to Batman. Nightwing is literally just some variation of Batman. Oh yeah, Red Hood. That's true. Red Hood is also like another completely different person that's also from a villain who, used to be a big serious vigilante, and he's a quote unquote Robin now. It's kind of like, do you want that type of diversity, or do you want them to stick like Batgirl and Batman Beyond to the original? It's like neither is wrong. It's just depends on whether or not which you prefer. I think that's fine.
His uncle and the greatest superhero he's ever known. In universe, it makes thematic sense. It is consistent with his character, and again, Barry is currently not even the Flash right now. To those saying the suit should be darker, a darker shade of red, halfway through the Mark Waid run, the most iconic run there is for Wally, the metallic red was actually removed. The darker shade only really made a comeback because of the events of Flash
Hey,
Rebirth
there he
and the
is.
return of Barry Allen.
That's the guy I was talking about. This is the old OG Flash. Man, he even wore the the jeans and everything. I think this was like the old school Justice League or something like that. But yeah, that's that Flash I remember. Can't remember his name, but I do know he's a Flash.
And to the people saying Wally stole Barry's logo, this is the same logo Wally had for the majority of his career. I'd even go as far as saying it was about 90% of it. But at the end of the day, is this really a problem? It's such a non-issue because Barry has borrowed from Wally's look so many times as well. And in some cases, it's even more noticeable because it happened in adaptations that everybody watched. Take Young Justice for example, where the white eyes and
Oh,
the logo design are clearly pulled from Wally's suit. The same thing happens in the 2004 Batman cartoon. DC doesn't really care about these tiny differences. All that matters is that the character looks like the Flash, so
true.
honestly, you probably shouldn't care that much either. So at this point, we are going to introduce our very first debunk time segment, yes, because this is where the LARPing really starts to show itself. One of the arguments that started floating around during
Oh, the
all of
Dark
this
Flash.
discourse was the
Ooh,
idea that
poster,
Black
I guess.
Flash is way faster than Wally West because he caught up to him in a panel from 30 years ago. Now, I know power scaling debates can get really ridiculous at times, but this one in particular is very funny because it ignores about 3 decades of character progression. First off, Wally has gotten significantly faster since that moment. We are talking about a character who has surpassed the Speed Force itself, the same Speed Force that, by the way, is a literal thing that creates the Black Flash. Second, modern Wally has access to abilities that simply don't exist during that original era. He has dimensional, spatial, and even narrative level abilities on top of newer energy-based techniques that he developed long after those earlier stories. And third, the comic itself straight up tells us that Wally outran the Black Flash, so the interpretation that Black Flash is just faster doesn't really hold up when you actually look at the story. The only real advantage he has is endurance. His whole role is essentially acting like death for speedsters. He doesn't need to be faster than them, he just needs to keep chasing them until they eventually slow down. And the way the character works
Crazy how they stated in comics. Then Black Flash is time itself adapts to speedsters. While it's meant that he pound proved while he's smart but not fast. And
is
just becomes a
actually
straight
pretty
up argument
interesting.
from there.
Black Flash tends to match the speed of whoever he's chasing, meaning he's never too far behind. Think of a personal death character for each and every
Black Flash Glazers are just TikTok readers. That's a good point, actually.
speedster. Think of it like being tethered to somebody. If you ever played Chained Together, it's basically that idea. You're connected to another player and constantly moving at a similar pace. That's why characters like Jay Garrick or Max Mercury are sometimes able to stay ahead of him for a while, even though they're technically slower than Wally. It's not about raw speed, it's about the chase, and even the idea that Wally had some kind of head start in the original scene doesn't really work either, because the two of them basically started moving at the exact same time. But again,
Yes,
this what happens
science.
when people pull a single panel off the internet without the surrounding context. The conversation is about whether which version of the character exists in someone's head, and once you start noticing that pattern, that headcanon fanfiction pattern, you see it everywhere, not just with The Flash, but especially with the MCU fandom. Because another type of LARPing that pops up all the time is what I like to call retroactive expertise. These are the people who discovered a character through a movie or a TV show, which is perfectly fine by the way, and then suddenly start talking about the character's entire history like they've been reading the book for decades. A really good example of this is Iron Man. You'll often see people claim that Tony Stark was a lame or irrelevant character before the MCU, and that Robert Downey Jr. basically created the version of the character everybody likes today. Now,
Even
did
crazier.
the MCU massively boost Iron Man's popularity? Absolutely.
There's no denying that.
The idea that
I mean, yeah, like, no offense, guy was what was it? Cool, but I think in comparison to something like Spider-Man, Captain America, and some of the X-Men, Iron Man was literally the short end of the stick. It isn't until he got like his literal first movie where things literally skyrocketed for him. He became more popular.
Tony Stark only became interesting because of the movies is just not true. In the comics, Tony Stark has always been a deeply complex and often self-destructive character, yes, defined by his
Guy's an alcoholic. A self-destructing alcoholic.
obsession and with progress and his constant battle with his own flaws. He started out as a weapons manufacturer, somebody who literally profiled from building instruments of war, but after his origin story,
Again, basically the movie took the main core factors of him, but again, comic book Iron Man and movie Iron Man are so different. There's just no contest. Same thing with, like, for example, comparing movie with cartoon shows and whatnot. Like, there are so many different versions of these characters. It's kind of crazy. It's essentially just pick your bottle and drink it. Because even though you can find a better one, chances are you might have more fun with the one you like.
when shrapnel from one of his own weapons nearly kills him, that moment becomes both a literal and symbolic turning point. He transforms from a man who builds weapons into somebody who dedicates his life to protecting people from them, and from there, Tony becomes one of the most important figures in the Marvel universe.
The old
He's a
comic.
genius-level inventor, a futurist who constantly tries to anticipate threats
Mark
before they happen.
5.
He's one of the most central members
I know
of the
it's from the
Avengers,
movies, but still.
often acting as their
I like that
financer
they're numbered.
and their technological backbone. But at the same time, Tony's biggest strength is also one of his biggest flaws. His intelligence makes him believe that he's the only person capable of solving certain problems, which a lot of the time he actually is. But it leads him to take on responsibilities that no one single person should realistically carry. That arrogance creates some of the most interesting conflicts in his stories, because even when Tony is acting out of genuine concern for the world, his methods can be extremely or incredibly controlling, sometimes even crossing ethical lines. And
Come to think of it, there's also like a version of him that's literally a teenager. They quite literally reinvented the Iron Man thing. Like an inexperienced kid who kind of became Iron Man. What was it? Iron Man Armored something? Man, I remember that show, but I can't remember it fully. It also had like rather interesting. What was it? Mandarin, I guess. That was the guy who was using the rings, right? That has to be it. Man, trying to remember stuff and talking about this is kind of crazy, but let's continue.
on top of that, there's the personal side of the character. A part the MCU basically kind of skimmed over. Tony Stark's struggle with alcoholism is one of the most famous, long-running arcs in Marvel Comics. Stories like Demon in the Bottle show you the pressure of being Iron Man, running a company, and constantly facing global threats, eventually pushing him towards addiction. It's a reoccurring battle too. Tony isn't written as somebody who simply beats alcoholism and moves on. He's a recovering addict. Sometimes he slips back into alcoholism, which makes the struggle feel real and ongoing. Even the Iron Man armor itself works as a metaphor. Yes, it's a suit that allows him to save the world, but it also represents the way Tony isolates himself from the rest of the world. Early on, he literally needed the suit to survive, and over time, it became the barrier he hides behind instead of dealing with the people around him. So when people say Iron Man was a boring character before the MCU, it usually tells you one.
No, he just wasn't the most popular one. That's it. Again, different shows and medias existed for other franchises, but Iron Man was literally kept in the comics as far as I remember. Again, the only reason for I remember the Armored Adventure stuff is because the movie was coming out, so it essentially coincided with the movie to create a different version of Iron Man. It's, again, exposure through different medias does help.
Thing. They are not talking about the comic character, they're talking about the version of Iron Man that exists in internet discourse, which again circles us right back to LARPing, because when people speak with absolute certainty about characters they've never
This comes from what I pulled from reading as a small amount of Iron Man.
actually engaged with.
At least he's honest. I haven't read Iron Man as well. Like, I just remember some of the stuff from video games and other shows. Barely even read the comics. And even then, it's like, old school comics are whack. Like, that time Iron Man literally dropped a nuke at the core of planet Earth. That is still the craziest thing he's ever done. Straight up just blast a nuke on planet Earth's core to see what happens. That's literally what he did with it. Just see what happens. Old school comics are whack, but yeah, aside from not reading them that much, no one says you can't like overall from a different media that you absorb, but at the exact same time, that's that version of that character. Iron Man from the movies is different from the Iron Man from shows and different from the Iron Man from the comics. All of them are different. There's a reason for why I hate the whole multiverse stuff thing for shows. Not because it's not fun to see like different versions or like iterations of the character. It just becomes so difficult to keep track of, not only who's the original Iron Man, i.e. the one everyone else uses as a base template or something, but it really, really becomes tiring to keep track of everything about said character throughout different medias. It's tiresome. It's very tiresome.
In the fandom, they're role-playing as experts inside it, and that's the most annoying part. Now, I know this is primarily a comic book channel, but it would be borderline irresponsible for me to not mention at least a little bit about what's happening right now in the anime space lately.
Oh boy.
If we're going to talk about LARPing, then we have to talk about what I've been lovingly starting to call the LARPu Kaizen. And if you've spent any time in JJK fandom over the last couple of years, you probably already know exactly where this is going: the constant slander campaign against Yuta Okkotsu. Apparently, this man is a fraud, which, funny enough, basically the same people that are saying this are the same people we already know are going to switch up the second Mappa animates a Sendai Colony. We've already started predicting it. The people are literally counting down the days to the great switch up of 2026, when the exact same crowd of people who have been calling Yuta a fraud suddenly start posting clips of him fighting and acting like they've been fans the whole time, because that's usually how these things go. But what really exposes the LARPing is when you actually try to have a conversation with somebody about Yuta. You'll see people attempting to break down his fights, explain his abilities, or talk about what makes him strong as a character. only for the other person to casually admit they haven't even read the manga, which kind of raises the obvious question,
Bruh.
who exactly are you trying to impress? Because it feels like a lot of people online are trying to fit into this imaginary consensus, where everybody pretends to agree that Yuta is a fraud, even though nobody can actually explain why. And if they do try to explain it, the argument usually boils down to one thing: Yuta would be nothing without Rika, which is one of those takes that sounds confident until you actually look at the story for about 5 seconds. First off, Yuta reached special grade status even after Rika was supposedly gone. That alone should already tell you that the character isn't dependent on her the way people like to claim. If you actually look at most of Yuta's fights, Rika usually goes down first after taking a few heavy hits, and once that happens, Yuta is the one who has to carry the rest of the fight on his own. So the idea that she's somehow doing all of the work really doesn't hold up. But the funniest argument is the one where people say it's cheap or fraudulent for Yuta to rely on Rika in the first place, which is kind of strange because that is literally his cursed technique. Rika exists because Yuta created her with his own cursed energy. She isn't some external power he stumbled across. She's the result of his own ability manifesting in the story, and even his copy technique revolves around that relationship. He can only replicate another curse technique after Rika consumes a piece of that person whose ability he's copying, a limb, a fragment, something connected to them. That entire
Even a
system
hairpiece?
is built around Yuta's
Kind of
power. So acting
borked.
like Rika isn't a part of his ability is like saying a character from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a fraud for using their stand.
No offense, but when I heard people use the word fraud on something like Thrag, I was like beyond confused. Granted, I haven't read Invincible, but I do know the story when the show was starting off. It's like when I first heard about the final boss Thrag, I was like, damn, this guy's crazy. The whole ordeal with spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the comics, him creating a mass army with like with those insects that Nolan spent time with. The whole ordeal with Battle Beast turning him into a literal pelt for him, and dual wielding, what was it? One of those lizard guys from the heavy gravity planet as like little, what was it? Ball and chains to use against the opponents, and then of course the infamous final battle in the sun. Like overall, the guy was bonkers cracked, but at the exact same time, I was like interested in how exactly they'll change him, because Tech Jacket was something they changed, and it was like, oh, I don't know much about Tech Jacket, but I know he was like a type of Mark style character, not really much like Mark, but still somewhat familiar to him, kind of like a Mark 1.2 or maybe 2.5 in a sense, and changing him to a different character, female character, which had a different style and change. It was kind of different, kind of unique. And when Thrag was going to be brought into the big screen, I was like interested to see how they'll handle him. And people were calling him fraud for not even throwing a punch, literally just retreating, and then just there being like, so apparently, unless you kick ass, literally on the first get go, if you don't do that, you're considered a fraud. Like, man, can you imagine if like people were taking a character from something like like Thanos? Like the guy was foreshadowed in Avengers, and it took him several movies before he finally got to be in his own movie and you know dominate. Like he was built up to an insane degree, and you'd think everyone would call him a fraud, but no, just straight up no. But I guess that's the overall what you'd expect from people like this. They don't anticipate the character and their interactions with the heroes and possible other villains first. Like I'm honestly more into the having a character that is willing to be restrained and subsequently do nothing. And then when you finally get to see them in action and they absolutely conquer the entirety of everything, it's like, yep, this is the big deal we've all been trying to face off against. It's kind of like when you had someone like Frieza from Dragon Ball. You had like all those other characters, Kui, Dodoria, Zarbon, the Ginyu Force. And when you finally got to Frieza, not only did he pull out several transformations, he was pretty much impossible to compete. It took Goku literally kind of performing a prophecy slash transformation of a Saiyan, the Super Saiyan transformation, to basically equal that incredible power. It's kind of like that. It's exciting, but like it's crazy how people are willing to have this character be an overpowered battle beast in a sense, as opposed to like having him be more intriguing and having interactions with others, like straight up reserving the killing intent in battles for later, like a climax. It's crazy. People are willing to have straight up action, and no calm before the storm style in ordeals with everything. It's nuts. Man, roll the clip.
Imagine calling Dio a fraud because he uses the world in a fight. It doesn't make any sense. And again, this loops right back to the LARPing problem. A lot of people in these spaces aren't reacting to the story itself. They're reacting to the version of the story that exists in memes. Back when Yuta disappeared for
The
dozens of chapters,
memes.
people started joking about him being a fraud simply because he wasn't around. At that time, it was
See what I mean? It's like, why though?
funny. Everyone understood that it was just internet humor, but at some point it stopped being a joke. People started repeating it so much that they began treating it like an actual analysis, even though it contradicts the character's entire track record in the entire series. All that he plans to do, Yuta that is
Yuta's
to
calendar.
win. And when a community
Make it
starts
close, but
repeating
win
something
again.
long enough, eventually people show up who assume that narrative must be true, even if they've never actually seen the evidence themselves. That's the moment where a fandom turns into a group of people pretending to be a part of a fandom, which is basically the definition of being a fake fan. And that's really the heart of the problem. LARPing doesn't just create bad arguments, it slowly creates and changes the way fandoms talk about the characters they're supposed to care about. Instead of conversations built around the actual stories, you end up with debates being clipped built around panels, memes, out of context screenshots, and secondhand opinions.
Yep.
People start repeating takes they've heard online instead of forming their own, and once enough of that happens, the loudest voices in the room aren't the people who actually know the material. They're the people who are the most
look at all that
confident
Spider-Man
pretending that they
merch.
do. Now, obviously, this isn't every fan. There are still plenty of people who genuinely love these characters, read their stories, and want to have real, genuine discussions about them, but the louder the fake fan LARPing gets, the harder it becomes to separate actual fans from the ones who are just playing the part. And eventually you end up in situations like the ones we talked about today. Flash discourse where people argue about characters they haven't read, MCU debates where people rewrite decades of comic book history, anime communities repeating the same jokes until they turn into fake narratives about the characters. It's all the same pattern, and honestly, the fix is pretty simple. Read the stories, watch the shows, engage with the characters for yourself, because at the end of the day, you don't need to LARP as a fake fan. One, you can just be one. Just get good and be a fan. Be the person that you're trying to be.
Be a faker.
Stop cosplaying for the fashion. Just join the community proper. I promise you, it is a much more rewarding experience. But yeah, guys, let me know down below, which community are you a part of that you secretly hate? Communities that really make you upset, because any person within
Devil
that
May
space
Cry.
could be somebody who just wants to rage bait you, and you have to hold
Why
your
that of all
breath,
things?
hold your voice, keep your peace, Otherwise, you're just going to combust. Let me know down below.
Potentially
I'm sure there's going to be
unrelated.
a lot of similar
Thank
takes.
you, but
There are a lot of
also
very
what?
notorious fandoms out there for certain characters, certain
Like, straight up,
shows,
what a
movies,
poll.
and we know who they are. It's just up to you guys to start the discussion. But yeah, remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, see you all later.
Persona.
Take care. Deuces. Peace.
Peace to you as well, my guy. And you bring up good points. If only fandoms were like this nowadays.